thought the library would finally be empty at this hour. Turns out, I was wrong because someone else had already claimed the silence I came looking for. And he was fast asleep on it. The clock over the entrance ticked toward 10:30 p.m. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing above me. I walked past rows of untouched textbooks, novels, and forgotten encyclopedias, clutching my jacket tighter. The day had been a mess. My roommate wouldn't stop playing his awful EDM remixes. The dorm was a chaos of laughter and spilled beer, and I needed somewhere to breathe, somewhere to remind myself that the world could be quiet, if only for a few hours. But then I saw him. He was slouched over a wooden table near the back, right under a lamp that spilled gold across his hair. A messy mop of black curls framed his pale face, and his hoodie was tugged up around his shoulders as though he had been fighting against the chill of the room. His head rested on an open book, the page pressed against his cheek as if the words themselves had lulled him to sleep. Something about him stopped me in my tracks. I should have walked past. I should have picked the farthest table, opened my notebook, and disappeared into equations or half-finished essays. But instead, I froze, because in that moment, he looked sound-touchable, fragile, as if waking him would break something important, though I didn't yet know what. The absurd part, he wasn't even supposed to be here. The library at this hour was always deserted, a forgotten refuge for strays like me who didn't belong anywhere else. Yet here he was, as if fate had decided to place him directly in my path. I leaned against the nearest shelf, watching him, his lips parted slightly with each breath, soft and steady, his chest rising and falling in rhythm. I almost laughed, the thought crossing my mind that maybe the books had been too boring for him, that maybe he'd intended to study but lost the battle. But the way his hand clutched the edge of the book told another story, like he hadn't meant to fall asleep, like he was holding on to something he couldn't let go. I told myself to leave him alone. And yet, the next thing I knew, I was walking closer. The table creaked as I set my books down, the sound sharp in the silence. His eyelashes flickered. My heart skipped. Was he waking up? No. He just shifted slightly, his cheek sliding across the page. And then he stilled again. Jesus, I muttered under my breath, pulling out a chair. You're really out. I sat down across from him, my gaze unwilling to move away. There was a strange pull about him, as if I'd stumbled onto a secret that wasn't mine to keep. I wondered what he was studying, why he looked so tired, what weight dragged his shoulders down enough to make him fall asleep in a public place. And then, against my better judgment, I whispered, "You'll hurt your neck like that." He didn't respond. I exhaled and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. This was insane. I didn't even know his name, and yet here I was, whispering to him like we were sharing some kind of midnight confession. I rubbed at my temple, torn between the urge to leave and the inexplicable need to stay. That was when he stirred. His hand twitched. His lips parted in a soft groan. And then his eyes opened. Dark, heavy-lidded eyes met mine across the table. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The silence became electric, alive, like the air itself was holding its breath. Then he sat up slowly, blinking against the light. His curls fell into his eyes, and he brushed them aside with a tired hand. His voice, when it finally came, was rough and soft all at once. You've been staring at me. Caught. Heat rushed to my cheeks, and I scrambled for words. I wasn't well. Maybe a little. His mouth curved into the faintest smile. It wasn't mocking, though. It was warm, like he'd caught me doing something embarrassing but forgivable. like he didn't mind. Sorry, I muttered quickly. You just looked. I stopped myself before the word beautiful slipped out. You looked uncomfortable. I thought about waking you. He studied me in silence, his gaze steady and unflinching. And then, to my surprise, he chuckled. A low, husky sound that spread warmth through my chest. Guess I must have looked pretty pathetic, he said, rubbing his eyes. Fell asleep right in the middle of Steinbeck. That's gotta be some kind of crime. I laughed before I could stop myself. You're not the first. Trust me. I've seen worse. At least you weren't drooling on the pages. He snorted softly, shaking his head. And just like that, the tension cracked, replaced by something easier, lighter, something dangerously close to comfortable. The library around us felt smaller now, like the two of us had carved out a corner where the world couldn't reach. So, he said, resting his chin in his hand, do you always watch strangers in their sleep? Or am I special? I smirked. Only the ones who look like they're dreaming about escaping this place. His eyes flickered, a shadow passing through them. He didn't answer right away, just closed the book slowly, like hiding something. That was the first time I wondered what kind of storms he carried inside him. The next days blurred into a pattern I didn't expect. Every night, around the same late hour, he was there. Sometimes already asleep over his books, sometimes awake and lost in thought. And sometimes, he was waiting for me. His name was Evan. He told me on the third night, as if we had already agreed that names didn't matter until they had to. He was a sophomore, like me, though his world seemed heavier. He studied literature but spoke about it like it was both a burden and a refuge. There were days his smile didn't reach his eyes, when he'd close a book too fast, like it had reminded him of something he wanted to forget. Still, I kept showing up, and so did he. We built a strange little ritual, sharing silence, passing notes on scraps of paper, whispering when the quiet pressed too heavily on our chests. Sometimes, he'd fall asleep again, and I'd sit there, fighting the urge to brush a curl out of his face. Other times, he'd catch me watching him and smirk, as if daring me to admit I couldn't look away. But the night everything broke. The storm was louder than the library lights. I found him pacing between the shelves, his hoodie clutched tight around him, hands shaking. His eyes were rimmed red, as if he hadn't just been reading but running from something. Evan, I asked softly. He flinched like I'd caught him doing something forbidden. Don't, his voice cracked. Don't look at me right now. But I couldn't not. I stepped closer. What happened? For a second, he was silent, fighting it. Then the words burst out of him like they'd been trapped for too long. My dad found out. About me. About everything. He said I'm a disappointment. That I'm not his son anymore. The air rushed out of my lungs. He stood there, trembling, trying so hard not to break. And I realized in that moment how much he had been holding back all those nights. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. He laughed bitterly, the sound sharp. What good are apologies when you're the thing people hate? When you're the mistake they don't want to claim? I couldn't take it anymore. I crossed the space between us and pulled him into my arms. At first, he resisted, stiff and shaking. But then, slowly, his hands gripped my jacket, clutching it like a lifeline, and he buried his face into my shoulder. It's not your fault. I murmured into his hair. You're not broken. You're not wrong. For a long while, we just stood there in the hollow quiet of the library, Two boys holding onto each other as if the world outside had collapsed. His tears soaked through my shirt. But I didn't care. All I wanted was to keep him standing. To remind him he wasn't alone. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were glassy but steadier. He whispered, "Why are you doing this? Why do you care?" I swallowed, my heart hammering. "Because you're the first thing in a long time that's made me want to stay. Because every night I come here, I'm not just escaping anymore. I'm finding you." The words hung in the air, raw and reckless. And then, before I could doubt myself, I leaned in and kissed him. It was soft at first, hesitant. His lips tasted like salt and courage. For a heartbeat, I feared he'd push me away. But instead, he melted into it, kissing me back like he had been waiting for someone to tell him he was wanted. When we finally broke apart, he let out a shaky laugh. "You're insane." "Probably," I admitted, grinning through the adrenaline. "But you're stuck with me now." The weeks that followed weren't perfect. His father stopped calling. He fought through nights of silence, of self-doubt, of feeling like an exile in his own skin. But I was there, sitting beside him in the library, studying, laughing, holding his hand under the table where no one could see. And slowly, piece by piece, the heaviness around him began to lift. One evening, months later, we sat by the same lamp where I had first found him asleep. The book in front of him lay open, forgotten, while his head rested against my shoulder. "You ever think about that night?" I asked quietly. He hummed, half smiling. "You mean the night you watched me drool on Steinbeck?" I nudged him. "You weren't drooling." "Sure." His voice softened. "Yeah. I think about it all the time. Feels like everything started there." I looked at him, his curls catching the light, his smile easy for once, unburdened. My chest tightened with something fierce and certain. "Evan," I said, my throat dry, "I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I want to see it with you." His hand tightened around mine, and his eyes met mine with a brightness that left no room for doubt. "Then don't let go," he whispered. So I didn't. The library, once a place of escape, had become the place where I found him, where we found each other. And no matter how many storms waited outside, I knew one thing for sure. He was my quiet in the chaos, my peace among the pages, and I would never stop choosing him. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.